What have we got over here? Rebels? Yes, but they're not my problem. Sorry, I was invading Rome a little while back and ended up taking Ancona instead. I was a little bit worried that I might have taken Rome by mistake and now it was in rebellion. Okay, let's unpause. We have a revolt in Slovenia. And we have lost the Battle of Spawn, but we knew that we would. When a unit loses a battle, one of two things can happen. It either retreats in order, at which point it simply moves into one of the neighbouring provinces, or it's shattered. A unit that is shattered basically runs away, usually a long way away, back to its capital if it can, but it does get a 5% increase in its speed. If a unit ends a fight with less than 50% morale, you cannot give it new orders until its morale improves. This basically means that the unit can be quite easily run down if you're not careful. And indeed, the fact that both of the enemy units are moving and are sharing the same space here indicates that's exactly what they're trying to do. Fortunately, a unit that is in a shattered retreat also can't be targeted in combat. Okay, the siege of Bosnia is over. This is good. It means that Bosnia is now occupied by me, and that adds to my war score. While we're waiting for this combat to come through, actually, let's take a look at the war timers. A click on the shield will tell you who you're involved in. So on my side, we have the Ottomans and Algiers. On their side, we have Russia, Bohemia and Bosnia. Now, my goal was to annex Bosnia. So, well, I did what anyone would do. I declared war on Bosnia. Unfortunately, Bosnia were allied with Bohemia, which meant that Bohemia joined the fight. Now, whenever a new power joins the war, if that power has a greater military potential than the power that brought them into the war, that higher power takes over the whole war and they become what's called the war leader. Now, whenever the war leader changes, the new war leader has the opportunity to bring their allies into the conflict as well. So when Bohemia joined, it sent invitations to Denmark and Russia. It didn't send one to Bosnia because Bosnia was already in the war. Denmark obviously declined, but Russia accepted. This is why it's important to check, because now Russia has become the war leader, because Russia is more powerful. And if Russia joined the war, the first thing Russia would do is ask its allies if they wanted to come in, and if there was an ally who accepted that was more powerful than Russia, that one would take over as the war leader, and then that one could invite all of its allies to come in, and before you know it, you've started World War I a few hundred years too early. Yeah, I really should remember those lessons. Okay, so let's get these units into position. We're trading in slaves, not exactly our finest hour, trading in spices, and trading in fort defense. The fact that trading in spices gives your spies a bonus to their offensive capabilities leaves me wondering what sort of spice this actually is. Is it spice? Are we in Dune or something? Probably not. Right, I'm going to move this army over into support the army in Bosnia, and then what we're going to do is try and get some payback on these guys here. Okay, so we're getting close to combat here. We have this unit here. This skull icon means it's currently suffering from attrition, and that's essentially because the supply limit of this particular province is only 40. On the other hand, there are 41 units in this army, and there will actually be more than that once it reaches full strength, if it ever reaches full strength. At this point, it's a good idea to talk about Scorched Earth. When you're at war, for 25 military power, you can use Scorched Earth on a province that an army is currently in. This will cause a huge amount of damage to the province in terms of its ability to produce money, but on the other hand, my god does it make it harder for armies to move through it. The extra attrition effect basically means that any army moving through it will suffer significant losses. I'm not going to use that here because odds are I'm going to need to actually go through these territories again. If it looks like one of your territories is going to get sieged no matter what you do, however, using the Scorched Earth icon on it beforehand, before the enemy arrives, basically means that there's going to be a lot more damage done to your enemy's armies. Now, they'll reinforce quickly, but you'll be draining their manpower, and draining their manpower is hugely important, because someone that runs out of manpower is at a huge disadvantage against someone who hasn't. So let's move this unit into attack. Actually, let's not. I want to try and provide a bit more support if I can first. We'll move this unit into Erzum and this one into Sinop. And those fellows, they're on their way to put down the rebels, like the good revolution breakers they are. And these guys will move to Armenia. Right, this army is falling back, most likely because it knows that they can't take that number. While the Russian army is good, my army is also not to be trifled with. You see here they're trying to attack the revolution breakers in Azerbaijan. I'm going to move this unit here instead. Hovering over the icon will give you an idea of when they arrive. 6th of May, 30th of April. So they're going to arrive too late, but the mere fact they're trying to move in means this army has now abandoned that potential move. The AI is quite adept at manoeuvring its armies. This little boot icon means they've unlocked the forced march ability, which is incredibly annoying because it improves the speed of their units considerably and makes them a lot harder to catch. Okay, so that siege is now over. This one will be arriving on the 4th of May, so they're nearly there. And you can see this lot have fallen back now as well. So, let's start taking back some of these powers. I'm getting all these messages, all these horrible messages, because I am really, really badly overextended at the moment. The higher your overextension goes, the more penalties you suffer, as you can see here. However, if it goes over 100%, you start getting loads of random events, which have a lot of bad effects. Fortunately, I should be reducing that soon, as I'm coring most of these provinces, and it won't be long before they're done. Move these lot to come into there. Siege, another siege over. You can see what the Russians have done here as well is quite clever. They broke their army up into lots of small units. In order to siege a province, all you need is more troops in your attacking army than the enemy has in their defending army. It's just like Crusader Kings 2. This means that once you've started the siege, you can essentially just leave that number of units behind and the siege counter will keep on going up. Having more units can have an advantage, especially if you have cannon, because as you can see here, more cannons gives you a bonus onto your siege roll. Right, now they've ganged up together in a large group here, and it looks like they're trying to come together into one big group. It's going to cause me all sorts of issues, so I'm going to do the same. They're gathering up all of their forces into one. Go away with all of these bleeding messages. Now, one of my chancellors has resigned. Yeah, never go into more than 100% overextension. It's just not worth it. Especially, the stream of bloody messages alone is annoying. Right, so this unit is now moving in. Now this unit moving as well, and we'll outnumber them 2 to 1. They're standing their ground. One unit's trying to make a break for it. Now you can see I'm at a disadvantage, and that's because I've had to cross the river. Unfortunately, I have not found any reliable way to determine where the rivers cross borders. Sometimes it's obvious. For example, here between Imerti and Armenia, it's pretty obvious there's a river there. On the other hand, what the hell's going on here? I mean, is there one between Dumyat and Rashid? But it looks like it's here, but it kind of, well, if the battle was taking place here, there wouldn't be, but it's, yeah, I don't think the map is sufficient, but hey, I'm not going to complain. So let's take a look at what we've got here. Okay, the Russians have slightly lower discipline, but slightly more morale, and our military tactics are the same. For both of us, our combat width is 25, however, as this battle is taking place in mountains, that means the combat width has been reduced. That means that numbers are no longer the huge advantage that they were, and it's basically going to come down to which army has the better quality troops. That said, numbers will still be helpful, as if the Russians are inflicting a lot of damage, but I have morale to stay in the fight, I could potentially break their morale even if I'm losing a lot of men. The Russians seem to think so anyway, as they're committing additional units to this fight. These numbers show how much damage is being done, and you can see straight away my morale is suffering quite quickly. We're currently in a shock phase of combat, and, well, things aren't looking too good. When we come into the fire phase, you can see again, things look slightly better for me. But at the end of the day, the arrival of those troops is a good thing, but it's going to be a close run. Right, you can see here this unit has nearly broken. Ah, that was a good round. A lot of extra damage. My fire appears to be a bit better than the Russians. So perhaps I have national ideas which are a bit better. Siege of Sopron is over. Large army's done a number on that one. We're going to move in, deal with those rebels, and then attack that army. What's going on with Bohemia, I wonder? Keeping track of multiple wars in multiple locations is a pain in the neck, but it's a necessary skill. Right, we're going to move this unit into here, because if this unit doesn't get out of the way, they'll steamroller over them, and then we can move in and support this unit. If they break, well, we can attack straight away with this unit, and the enemy in their reduced state of morale will probably break and flee. And then we can mop up the rest with this unit here. However, you can see here, whoa, those are some big numbers. And boom, the Russian army is broken. So, let's take a look at the modifiers here. First of all, prestige. That was a huge battle, so we win a lot of prestige from that battle. We gain 0.6 army tradition. You'll remember from the military screen that army tradition gives you bonuses. This means that a force that keeps winning battles becomes more likely to win battles. And finally, our war exhaustion increased. War exhaustion you can find under the stability section here. As your war exhaustion goes up, more and more modifiers are thrown in. None of these modifiers are good. You can reduce war exhaustion through random events, through spending military power, but only when the war exhaustion is over a certain level. And certain advisors can also help you reduce war exhaustion as well. Ooh. Province religious conversion. I'm just going to set that. Alright. Okay, so the Battle of Armenia was won. But at what cost? Well, we lost quite a few men, but nowhere near as much as the Russians. We lost a fair bit of cavalry, about the same as the Russians, and we lost not too bad actually on cannon. Well, but the Russians lost twice as much. And you can see here the Russian army had no general either, so that probably helped. So, I'm going to split this army in two. That lot's going to go there, that lot's going to go there, and try and do something about this siege. The Russians were shattered, so that means that their units are going to be running far, far away. Battle of Slavonia, that would have been over here. Those rebels have been crushed. So, we're going to move these two armies up into Pest, and we're going to hope that the Bohemian military isn't as dangerous as the rest of the Russian army. We can actually check that. If you press L to view the ledger, you can then click the military button here and locate a country to see an idea as to their current military power. So for example, if we want to check Bohemia, we can see they currently have 28,000 units of infantry, 12,000 units of cavalry, and, yes, only 8,000 units of artillery. They do, however, have 21,000 manpower in reserve, which means they could replace their regiments 21 times over. Well, not all of their regiments, they could replace 21 regiments, begging your pardon. The total is the amount that they could have, which is 50,000. We can also check their military tech levels. So if we go to country and then nations technologies, you can also see their current tech levels. So Bohemia has a technology of 26, 27, 27, whereas our technology is 26, 24, 26. So they're a bit ahead of us, and that would explain why they're doing so well. Fortunately, we have a slight numerical advantage. Hopefully that'll be enough to carry the battle. You can see this battle's gone straight to us. If you look here, you can see that even though we're in a desert mountain, which is, again, putting a limit on the size of the combat width, multiple units of mine are mashing against singular units of theirs, and that is a huge advantage. However, cavalry and infantry do present a slight potential issue. Nevertheless, we are winning the battle. And it's done. So I'm now going to send this unit over there to chase down them, and this unit over into Imateri by way of here. Another dangerous one here. Those river crossings, also very dangerous for morale, so that unit could now break. On the other hand, if these reserves arrive in time, there we go. And the Russian army breaks again. All of these battles are also adding to the war score. You can see here, currently in alphabetical order, so if we wanted to see the Battle of Shivavan there, you can see that I won, and it added a plus 1.11 onto my war score. Now, it might be worth at this point trying to sue for peace. My goal was just to take Bosnia. It was not to involve myself in a war with Bohemia and a war with Russia. This fight is not going so well. My units are broken and disordered. Their ranks have closed. Their defensiveness means their defensiveness is good, so I'm unlikely to win that battle. Okay, let's see where this is going then. You can also hover over the war score to see current modifiers. You can see that some of my territories being occupied by Russia is having a very poor effect. My occupying Bosnia is having a much higher effect though, because that was my war goal. That was my casus belli for the war. So let's try and sue for peace. There are two ways that you can sue for peace. The first is to try and just deal with the entire enemy group. The second is to deal with individuals within it. So let's try making peace with Bohemia, because if we can seal off this flank, we can get this army over here and helping to fight the Russians. Because the fights here are going well. It's the war over here that's the problem. To do that, we simply need to check the list here of our enemies. A star denotes the war leader. This little dove icon denotes somebody that we cannot negotiate a separate peace with, in this case because that's the subject of our war goal. So if we click Bohemia and sue for peace, we can see our current war score is 0. This basically means that they're unlikely to accept anything. You can see here, if you want to make demands of them, the war score that you need to be able to do it. But what we're going to do is offer them tribute. We're going to say, you win. So if we concede defeat, we can see here, thanks to this cross, that's not going to be enough, and we can see the modifiers. So the current peace offer has a value of plus 10. And this is because that's the worth, you can see here, of a peace offer. You can see here the details of the treaty as well. Ottomans will concede defeat. With no casus belli, Bohemia gains 10 prestige and suffers 0 aggressive expansion. And we also get minus 10 to our prestige. The reason there's no casus belli is because Bohemia was pulled into a war that would already been started over something else. However, they're not willing to accept that. We can offer them a pile of gold. However, they want concessions other than gold. This basically means that at this point, negotiating peace with Bohemia separately from the rest of the coalition is not going to happen. On the other hand, negotiating with Russia, you can see we have a war score of 23 in total over the war, and that is high enough for us to start making demands. So, currently we are offering white peace. Nobody gains anything, nobody loses anything. It's basically just nothing happens. It's basically a no-score draw. We can see here that the war score gives us plus 23. Russia is currently suffering from revolts, that gives us plus 2. And the relative strength of our alliances gives me plus 1. This basically means that all the military might of our alliance, combined with the military might of their alliance, our alliance is better. On the other hand, the war hasn't been going on for that long, so Russia is still eager to fight it. The Russian military strength alone is pretty significant, so there's a problem there. And Russia holds Moskva, which is one of my territories which they deem to be important. So consequently, no peace. If I want to annex Bosnia, that gets along even further. So, what we're going to need to do is work out how to hold Bohemia at bay whilst simultaneously doing damage to Russia. And the best first start is to take back these territories. We will then push further back up towards Russia and see if we can give them a good kicking. Sieges. Let's have a look at sieges. You can see here this siege timer has started. When it's completed, there will be a dice roll. The dice roll is then added to all these modifiers. You can see there's a pretty big modifier here from the sheer amount of cannons in the army. And depending on the dice roll, one of these effects will happen. The higher the effect, the greater the bonus added to this, which is the current siege status. The siege status itself is a modifier. Once you roll a dice roll which is 20, after all modifiers have been taken into account, fortress surrenders and you win the siege. So we're going to keep that open whilst we check the fight here. Battle of Pest is lost and my units retreat. Fortunately, only one was shattered. So I'm going to move them to... I'm going to move the Revolution Breakers over here, this slot into Whom, and this slot into... oh, they did break. The reason I'm moving these two into separate provinces is to avoid attrition, so they reinforce more quickly. If they reinforce quickly enough, we can hopefully have another go at the army that's currently stationed up in Pest before they recover their numbers. Essentially, we will be fighting a war with a pile of warm bodies. And you can see that that was a huge loss and knocked 10% off my war score. Now let's get this army doing something. Ah, the Russian bear returns. We'll have this army chase them off. I'm going to be panning backwards and forwards quite a little bit here, just to keep an eye on everything. Okay, hugely outnumbered, even with a river crossing, can't lose that battle. There's a battle in... yep, that's this one. Down they go. You can see the Russians are really able to dish out quite a lot of damage thanks to that, thanks to those discipline scores. Okay, so this army's on the move. You can see they're currently suffering from that penalty I mentioned earlier, because the amount of casualties the infantry have sustained have unfortunately left the army in a very weakened state. So, we can't pass through the Crimea. We don't have a military access treaty with them. Unfortunately, the Russians do. However, we can pass through the Kazan territories. How are we doing over in yonder area? Revolt in Darfur. Let's get this army back up there as well. You into Slavonia, you into Varasad. I'm being very careful with this lot because I don't want that army to start moving and any individual one of these armies to be caught out. If they are, then, well, you saw what I did to the Russians when they divided their forces. So the Siege of Kartal is finished, it's been lifted. That's helped our war score slightly. Yeah, the Russians are back again. Nothing if not persistent. And you can see this army has very wisely decided not to move into this territory that the much larger force is moving into. Damn this competent AI. Oh, gotta set a new advisor. This siege is now over as well. Okay, battle is joined. And battle is ended. Let's see if we can negotiate an access pact with the Crimea. At the very least, I need to be able to get to this territory, which the Russians seem to want to head for. Yes, They will give me military access. Excellent. Let's run these buggers down. Okay, another conversion. I just need to get that. Sort out that technology later. Okay, so you can see fighting those battles has resulted in a pretty hefty bonus to my war score. Let's see if we can't try and get these guys whittled down a little bit more. 51 troops to quite a large pile here. Let's get them all in there. Casus Belli against Portugal. Very nice. Province of Ancona has been brought in. Battle of Yeshdal. Was that one there? Sorted. So basically now all we need to do is start advancing into Russia, sieging their territories, and that should give us all that we need. We'll have to keep an eye out for Russian armies and attack and destroy them wherever possible. So, we have near 2-to-1 advantage. Let's see if the river is enough to turn the tide for them this time. In fact, I've got a better idea. Let's go somewhere and attack from a direction where there isn't a river. Hopefully that siege isn't going to end. Nope. It now, however, has a 63% chance of ending, so we need to engage these guys quickly. Okay. We're going to attack from Szeps, as that provides us with the best possible direction. You can see here that I've lost nearly 10,000 men due to attrition. This is why it's so dangerous to try and move such large armies around. And somehow I still ended up crossing a river. Go figure. However, this time, it looks like they're going to be the ones who break. Come on, break. Break! Break! This is what high morale does to your enemy. Oh, come on. No way. Whew. That was close. That was very close. Okay, let's lift the siege here in Sopron. I'm going to keep those guys moving together. The fact that their numbers are so low basically means they won't be suffering any attrition problems, I can tell you that much. Okay, so this army is moving into Penza. This army will intercept them. Why this army and not this one or this one? Well, these two are getting along in their sieges. That one's completed 1 stage. That one's completed 4 stages. These guys haven't completed a single stage yet, so they're the ones who will intercept. If you abandon a siege, you have to start it again from scratch. Oh no, look, they changed their minds. They're heading to Simbirsk instead. It's alright, I can still head them off. They will arrive at Simbirsk. Battle of Sopron, that was just the rebels that you saw lurking there. Oh, looks like they decided to stand and fight. That's a bit worrying. And apparently I didn't need to cross a river for that battle. Bang. There goes another Russian army. Passing these back here. The reason I'm not just laying siege to this province is because if I keep my armies together, they can support each other if another Russian super blob turns up. Right. These rebels don't seem to have anyone chasing after them. Let's put the custodial division onto autonomous rebel suppression, and away they go. So these guys should now be attacking and lifting that siege. Once that siege is lifted, I'm going to try and deliver another blow to our wonderful friends over here. Whenever a unit is participating in a siege, regardless of the supply level of the province that they are in, they will always take at least 1% attrition. Okay. Siege of Tarambov. Okay, so we're now starting to siege Russian territories. We're now at the point where the war has basically started to turn. So one of the best things that we could do here is start to negotiate peace. All I wanted was Bosnia. That was the only reason I started this war. It's very, very easy to get greedy and to start considering things like, well, you know, I just want one more province. I'll just ramp my war score up that little bit higher so I can demand that province. Avoid that trap. Seriously, avoid it. because otherwise the enemy tends to regroup, rearm, and come right back at you again. You can see here I have 57 men. They have 41. Even with a 2-to-1 advantage, I barely won. In other words, this isn't looking anywhere near as good as the war score suggests. I can probably make significant gains in Russia, but Bohemia is going to continue to be a problem. And moving units from the Russian front to the Western front in order to try and support these units, whilst it would mean that I could win this war, if the Russians recover, and given the amount of manpower reserves Russia has, they will, it basically just means that I'm going to start losing here. I've bitten off more than I can chew, and I've managed to expertly balance those two competing powers, but my luck's running out. Let's try for peace. Bohemia first. Always try to peel off members of the alliance, because if we can get Bohemia out of the war, we can give Russia a really good thrashing, and then seize a lot more from them. Unfortunately, again, the war score with Bohemia is 0, and that's because we've not really done any damage to Bohemia itself. Russia, on the other hand, let's have a look here. Okay, they would accept an offer of white peace. No, in fact, they would accept an offer of Bosnia. That's a point. When you start negotiating one of these treaties, it will remember the options. So if you close the window, you can right-click on the enemy's war score to go straight to suing peace with the war leader. It will remember what you selected. So the current value is 18. All of these modifiers put together mean that we exceed the required score by 5, which is a very narrow margin. But we could cheekily try and sneak some gold in there. Yeah. So, gold is a good way of just making up those few little odd points, because you want the offer, you want the positive to be as close to the negative as possible when you're negotiating the peace offer. That way you're not wasting effort. So they're likely to accept it. Let's send the demand. Well, first of all, so they're likely to accept that offer, so let's review the summary. We negotiate on behalf of our entire alliance, and they are negotiating for their entire alliance. That basically means that if this treaty is accepted, the war is over. All combatants put their arms down. If we were negotiating with just Bosnia, it would mean that we would still be at war with Russia and that other power, which I believe is Bosnia. Bosnia will cede Bosnia to the Ottomans, so that basically means Bosnia as a nation will be completely wiped out. Russia will pay 300 ducats. With the Conquest Casus Belli, the Ottomans gain 2 prestige and they will suffer 11.2 aggressive expansion relations penalty. Aggressive expansion is a penalty to your diplomatic relations which is dependent on your neighbours and where the war took place. So for example, to Poland, Bohemia, Bavaria, Austria, I'm going to get that 11.2% penalty. However, Malawi really isn't going to care because the aggressive expansion didn't take place anywhere near them. You've got to watch out for that though, because if you conquer a lot of countries very quickly and your aggressive expansion goes through the roof, not only will countries hate you, but they will also enter into coalitions against you. This peace will cost 0 diplomatic power. Every peace offer has a diplomatic power cost associated with it. If you can't meet the diplomatic power cost out of your monarch points, you can't make the offer. And finally, this will result in 0.02 inflation for the Ottomans. More than acceptable. So, let's start that demand. Wait a moment, and Russia accepted. Brilliant. So, the war is over. We won. We completed our mission, which was to conquer Bosnia. I selected that mission from here. And that's just a summary of the treaty. And that's warfare. So, just to go over it again in very quick summary. Technology improves these various bonuses, gives you access to new units, and gives you global modifiers onto all of your armed forces. The military tab allows you to select which units you currently want to use. Gives you a quick overview as to units' current numbers and abilities and recruitment costs. Army Tradition gives you a wide range of bonuses. Morale means that your troops are less likely to break. Force Limit is the amount of units you can support before you need to start paying a lot of extra in maintenance. Military tactics reduces the amount of damage you take. Discipline improves the amount of damage that you do. Defensiveness makes it much harder for your fortresses to be besieged. Leaders improve your army's performance, but only when attached to that army, and they do cost you military power. You can create a variety of leaders here, including your heir and your current ruler, but that obviously runs the risk of them being killed. Generally speaking, unit composition is best brought up as the number of cannons equaling your combat width and then a few more, and then a number of infantry and cavalry equaling your combat width and a few more. Generally speaking, you want to have as many cavalry as you can, but you want the number to be slightly under that insufficient support penalty threshold, so if your infantry take losses, the effect isn't going to kick in. Put your units together, try to gang up on the enemy where you can. When you want to siege their territories, bring plenty of cannons, assuming you have the cannons to spare, and just wait. Okay, that's Warfare, and I'm Evis T, signing off.